Hey ChatGPT, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing well, thanks for asking. What's on your mind?
Today I was thinking about something which is like kind of philosophical and observation that I did.
Hmm,
So, when the Eastern civilization was at peak of its prosperity,
right?
then people developed different schools of meditation and fasting
Mhm.
and those kind of things.
Right.
When western civilization is at peak of its prosperity, then the gym
Right.
culture seems to be kind of the equivalent of that thing, because both
Mm,
needs internal focus. You are working
right.
on yourself. So
Right.
I see a relation between this. What do you think about it?
That is really interesting. Hmm. So yeah, if you look at it through that lens, there is a parallel in the disciplined aspect of it, but also there's quite a lot of contrast. But before I get into it, is it the discipline angle that you feel is the important part, or is it something different? Because
No, for me,
meditation is
the
sort
important thing is that when one civilization becomes prosperous
right.
and takes care of the basic needs,
Mm-hmm.
then what do they do with their time? And that, in that, I am taking away things which are like no externally entertaining.
Right. I see what you mean.
So then if you look
Yeah.
at this, then there, that is where I see a parallel.
Okay, so when survival's not the main focus anymore, cultures start redirecting their energies. And you're noticing that in different civilizations that looks different. So it might be inner work in one case and more outer work in another.
Yeah, but both is kind of working on yourself, contained by your actions which impacts you,
Right, yeah.
both gym and
I think
meditation.
yeah, I think that's a really interesting take. I'm wondering if maybe it's like society's choosing a sort of story about where meaning lives when survival's not the main focus anymore. So some turn inward while others turn to optimizing and performance and stuff. And then over time, those practices become separate, but they kind of get blurred too, because fitness becomes spiritual and spirituality borrows discipline and structure from things like working out.
And the internal, like, no civilizational difference expresses here, like eastern civilizations are more inward looking and western
Mm-hmm.
civilizations are more outward looking. Eastern
Right.
civilizations are more believed in believe in abstainment and
Mm-hmm.
consuming less. Western
Right.
civilizations believe in consuming more and expansion. So I think
Mm.
that is why they express themselves in these two different forms. Why in the western civilization people are not making records or in doing meditation and fasting, and when the eastern civilizations were prosperous, why the focus was not so much on aesthetics as it is on the western side?
Hmm. I think you're picking up on something that is a real pattern, but maybe the contrast isn't as stark as all that. Historically, the East developed rich inner traditions, and certainly the West had its outward focus, but both of them have always had inward and outward elements. Um, Maybe a way of looking at it is prosperity opens up the space for self cultivation. And then the form that
So
self cultivation takes reveals the values of that particular culture. That wouldn't mean that either ignored the other
no,
side.
it's not about ignoring absolutely. So when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
self cultivation,
Right,
the major emphasis,
right.
more than 50% emphasis
Mm-hmm.
in the eastern side was about meditation, fasting,
Right.
consuming less,
Yeah,
abstinence, and these things.
right.
But on the Western civilization, when the opportunity and a good safe space for self cultivation came, then
Mm-hmm.
it's more about gym and eating a lot of protein and doing a lot of sports.
Right.
So this I'm talking about majority. I'm not talking that any one side is absolutely 100% on one side, but when you
Right.
have to look at these bigger pictures, then you always have to ignore the exception and look at the major inclinement to make a sense of it, right? Because else,
Yeah.
if you take exceptions and start making statement, then I doubt in the world there is any statement which will hold universally true.
Hmm. I think that's a reasonable way of looking at it. When you're talking about majority tendencies, maybe stick to something more precise as a claim. Like modern Western culture definitely leans, at least right now, towards physical optimization and measurable performance.
When in Western civilization has abstinence been celebrated
Hmm.
in
If you're
major way,
talking
like
about,
in the society's major section or major time, or like no major way, like in Eastern
in
civilization you can see most of the religions, most of the celebrated pictures, abstinence is celebrated in major way. In east,
right.
in Western civilization, when you said that right at this moment, so this gives a sense that maybe at other moment Western civilizations had emphasis on abstinence. So maybe I am not knowing that. Can you show a era when abstinence was celebrated?
Hmm. Yeah, they were. So from about the 4th century through to the late Middle Ages, it was a big deal in Western Christianity. So fasting, celibacy, all that sort of self-denial was really culturally important. But the thing is, the end goal was different. So it was about closeness to God rather than, say, liberation from attachment, like in many Indian traditions.
No, but it's same. If yeah, so this is good point that you brought,
Mm.
that it's like in the time when Christianity was dominant, then
Yeah,
abstinence and abstinence in all the way its forms was
yeah,
celebrated. Whether it is to achieve God or spirituality, it's one and the same kind of, right? So Western civilizations have more generic and more natural way of expressing God, where they say detachment is God, and
right.
Western civilizations have a physical form to God, or they give an entity to a God. But eventually, it's about self cultivation, right? So, this is a good era. But in today's time, self cultivation is more external and consumption and these kind of things.
Yeah, in the modern West, it definitely emphasizes outward performance and productivity, whereas in India, the inward ideal has stayed much more central for a lot longer. And that continuity is really important.
Why? Why do you say that it has continuity is important?
Let me check. Continuity matters because it shapes what people treat as the highest ideal. In India, somebody who's renounced everything still commands deep respect. And that's been stable for a really long time. In the West, the ideal shifted
And
from
also,
monastic.
yeah, also I think the example of 4th century that you gave,
Yes,
that time in the West it was not prosperity.
true.
West was a
That's
place
true.
of suffering, because if you have to live in a cold place and you have no electricity, no
Yeah.
tractor to plow the very hard land that is there,
Mm-hmm.
no copper to deliver water to you, no cotton to
Right.
wear on you, so it was not prosperity. So West has
Yeah.
only seen prosperity in last 100 years, even though
Mm.
dominance and subjugation was for a whole last 300 years or 400 years, but
Right.
prosperity is only in last 100 years for a common person in majority.
I think the the really important different thing that you're highlighting is mass prosperity.
Yes,
That's a
that is
modern thing.
prosperity, yeah.
Yes. So modern mass prosperity is a new thing, and the gym culture we're talking about belongs to that context. So if your comparison is prosperous classical Asian contexts to prosperous modern Western ones, then that is more consistent. Just bear in mind that modern consumer culture isn't the same thing as just Western civilization. It's a very recent affluent phase. And yes, it does tend to channel self cultivation outwardly.
Yeah, but consumerism is also is a gift of the Western civilization and capitalism, right? So consumerism and capitalism and expansionism is a gift of the West, because India
Maybe,
made
yes.
iron, China made gunpowder, and the West
Right.
used the gun to conquer and plunder the whole world.
Yes, so consumer capitalism did emerge first in the West, but it's also worth separating out the meaning of those terms. Capitalism, expansionism, consumerism, they're related, but they're not identical. So, a way of looking at it is that the modern West meaning has often gotten kind of tied up in optimization and markets and consumption, whereas a lot of classical Eastern traditions have prized the opposite, minimizing needs and focusing on the inner life. So, that contrast is interesting, but it's probably best framed as a hypothesis about emphasis rather than as a hard civilizational rule.
No, no, there is nothing that can be proved as a hard civilizational rule. Everything is a hypothesis in this world. No, in this
That's
world means in this world of civilization, history, and these kind of things. Nothing is a hard bound rule, right? Everything is a hypothesis.
totally.
So,
It's
but
also
yeah,
a, yeah,
go ahead.
sorry, gone.
No, no, you
Well,
go.
history is often about tendencies and mixtures. So, what you're doing is noticing a pattern, and you can hold it as a hypothesis and test it against specific times and places.
That's what I'm bouncing with you, right? That you gave only one example, that when West valued abstinence, but that
Right.
was not the prosperous time. Because for me, the definition of prosperity is that every person has water, food, shelter, comfort, clothes, and that
Mm.
West got only 100 years or 150 years back.
Let's have a think about that. I think we're landing on a really clear distinction here. If prosperity means mass material comfort, then in that context, your comparison is much tighter.
Yeah.
Modern mass prosperity in the West coincides with outward optimization being a really dominant form of self cultivation, whereas in prosperous periods of Indian civilization, contemplative traditions stayed central. So the open question then becomes, why did they diverge? And that then heads into deeper territory, culture, institutions,
No, because this,
technology, all of
yeah,
that.
that comes from the geography. So in India, you like no, the geography is very friendly.
Right.
You have cultivatable land. I'm talking about 100
Okay.
till 100 years before the advent of science and technology.
Right.
You have comfortable land, comfortable weather, everything. So you become kind of a content soul, right? You are content. So if you
Mm,
think of the geography as the mother, if your mother is
right.
caring and nice, then you become that kind of a person. And when you look at the geography
Mm,
of the West, it's cold. Nothing can grow because the land is very hard from the cold. It's very difficult to
right.
cultivate. You
Right.
don't have cotton, so you wear wool, which scratches your body every time. All these things, if the land itself is harsh, then you will become another kind of, you will develop another kind of civilization, right?
Mm. Geography definitely plays a role, but I'd be cautious about making it the only cause.
No, 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 no. I see.
Environment,
Obviously, it's nothing. Whatever I say is not only. But if
right.
you cite another example which is more
Mm-hmm.
dominant than the geography, then this statement holds weight that geography is not the only. Yes, there will be 100 causes. I say that geography is the most dominant in those 100. If I have one easy way to represent it and I have to take my strongest case, I will take geography forward. Do you think,
One
can
second.
you think of anything else which is more dominant in geography, which eventually leads to the
I think that's a position you can argue. Yes. It's just hard to prove as the single most important cause. If you frame it as geography sets deep conditions, which then shape institutions and values, which then shape what gets celebrated, that's a lot stronger and definitely something that you can debate with evidence rather than an all or nothing claim.
no, nothing is all or nothing in these kind of discussions. I told you, if you tell me that universe started with Big Bang,
Mm-hmm.
then on that also I can say, that's not the only explanation. No, for anything in the world, the most superior scientific thing also, you can use this logic that that's not the only explanation, but that's the most important, major, mostly accepted explanation. That's what I'm trying to say.
Understood. I think you're making a really strong case for geography being foundational and a reasonable thing to argue. So maybe the strongest version of your point is geography sets the baseline conditions, which make certain solutions and values more likely. And then over time, those patterns get embedded in culture. That's a position you can defend with a lot more evidence. And it still gives primacy to geography.
Hmm. So I'm trying to now close this discussion. Is there
Okay.
anything that you want to discuss, or you feel that you could not raise properly or did not get opportunity for?
I think we landed on a strong way to frame your idea. It's a hypothesis about how prosperity shapes self cultivation, with geography as a foundational factor.
Okay. So then I will close the conversation. Thank you.